Okay, so we are reading Dr. Wayne Dyer, The Shift. We are in chapter 4, page number 99.
Page 72 of the PDF. Again, turning to Shakespeare. I love this observation he makes in Henry VI, part 3. My crown is in my heart, not on my head, not decked with diamonds and Indian stones, nor to be seen. My crown is called content. A crown it is that seldom kings enjoy.
So again, my crown is called content. So what do I know? What have I experienced? What is my knowledge? That's the only thing that ultimately you're going to transcend with. The material aspect of things is going to be left over here. So what he's talking about is the spiritual aspect of your growth. That is what he's talking about here.
One of my personal heroes is Mother Teresa, who spent her later years teaching and serving others. She once remarked, "Love cannot remain by itself. It has no meaning. Love must be put into action, and that action is service."
So again, you may be a very loving person, but if it is not distributed through action, because how do you distribute it? Through action. And unless that happens, then it gets stale. So anything that stagnates, it gets stale.
These words have inspired me and have helped me make the shift from my ego's ambitions for serving myself towards a life dominated by service to others. Today, my life is almost 100% devoted to service in one way or another. Each day begins with a prayer of thank you.
So again, prayer of thank you. As soon as you're saying thank you, you're putting yourself in the right side of the grid. And then what you want, like I've explained this to you all before, when we go to someone's house, and that one frequency, it's actually the navel, I call it the happiness quotient. If that is not active, then people are not happy over there. Okay. Now, what puts you into that happiness is gratitude, is being grateful for whatever you have. So saying thank you for what you have is a very, very big thing in life. If you want to be happy, this is very, very important.
Each day begins with a prayer of thank you, which are the first words out of my mouth as I awaken. This is to keep me in a state of gratitude for all that I receive, as well as for the opportunity to live my days in service to others. As the famed Sufi poet Rumi once declared, if you only say one prayer in a day, make it thank you.
So again, gratitude is what makes the world go round.
Before beginning my day, I make every effort to do something for someone else. Since I receive volumes of mail, I often send off a book or a DVD of the shift, a set of CDs or a DVD or a PBS special. Something that I feel will brighten the day of a total stranger somewhere in the world. As I affix the postage, I take great joy in knowing that a surprise package of love in action will send a message to someone that there are people out there who care, and I am one of them.
So again, letting people know that you care is very important. Now, if someone sends you a message, respond from the heart. What is the problem? As much as you can do for another, do to your best what you can do for the other guy. And shift from selfishness to selflessness. And that's when the love starts to flow.
Often I call someone I've been told is grieving the loss of a loved one or is ill in a hospital setting. Other times, some money in an envelope goes to one of the many people who serve in my community. If I'm on the road in a hotel, I seek out the maids who serve me so anonymously and surprise them with a gift of some unexpected cash. The things I'm doing aren't reported for recognition, but to provide real, life examples of how shifting to meaning affects daily life.
So what is happening over here? Now, the moment you see now, if you are craving recognition for what you do, then it's a transaction. You're doing it for the recognition. But if you're just doing something for the sake of doing it, and there is no craving for any kind of recognition, then it becomes service. So there's a distinction that if you're thinking you're doing service, but actually you're craving the recognition, then it is no longer service.
There are a multitude of ways in which we can give. It doesn't really matter what we do. The point is to get in the habit of replacing our attention on ourselves with attention towards others. We must practice some radical humility, seek out others to serve, keep ego at bay, and do it without expectation of any reward.
So again, habit of replacing our attention on ourselves with attention towards others. So again, it's the shift from selfishness to selflessness, from individualized thinking to holistic thinking.
There are a multitude of ways in which we can give. It doesn't really matter what we do. The point is to get in the habit of replacing our attention on ourselves with attention towards others. We must practice some radical humility, seek out others to serve, keep ego at bay, and do it without expectation of any reward. I'm much more of a minimalist than I was when my life was dominated by wishes and demands of my ego. I now take great pleasure in minimizing my accumulations. I frequently go through my closets, my library, and my personal acquisitions of all sorts and give things away with no expectation of a thank you. I require very little in the way of luxuries. In fact, the less I have cluttering my living environment, the better I feel.
So now this is very important. We are in the habit of accumulating things. Now, what happens is that when we go for Vastu visits to anyone's place also, the first thing we tell them is to declutter. That stuff that you're not using, you're not going to use, get rid of it. Because anything that is stagnant, it's sitting there, always creates accumulation of depleting energy. I shared this example with you all that even the pieces that we have in our houses, if they are not touched on a regular basis, they start radiating a negative field. So that's why decuttling, if you'll see any kind of spiritual person, you will find their environment is decluttered. They don't have too many accumulated stuff. They start becoming simplistic. They start living very frugally. They start living very, very contently with what little that they have.
As I stated previously, I don't let a single day go by without devoting myself to being supportive and in service to others. The irony is that the more I give away, the more I spend time, energy, and money serving others, the more I get back. And it all keeps recycling, since without ego's attachment to my stuff and my earnings, the more I receive and the more I'm able to give away.
So this is a uplifting cycle instead of a vicious cycle which is going downwards. It's a cycle which is taking you upwards. So the more you give, the more the universe will give to you to give more. So that's why giving and letting out, donating becomes extremely important. I remember the situation when we were going through a very bad financial time. I didn't have salary, I didn't have the money to pay salaries to the staff, and my father was still doing charity at that time. I can really tell all of you today that today, if I'm sitting here right now, it's simply because of my parents and what they did during the tough times. Because it comes back to you whether you like it or not. It's as simple as that.
Even so, I persistently remind myself of this fourth cardinal virtue because ego is tenacious and unwilling to retire gracefully. It pops up every now and again, urging me to think of myself first, to hoard what comes my way, and to expect huge thank yous and elaborate expressions of gratitude for my being such a wonderful man. It tells me that I can't afford to support the people I do or do things for others that my higher self wants to do.
So again, the ego is always selfish. The ego is always looking at itself. It wants, a thumbs up. It wants to be acknowledged all the time. But again, when you look at a spiritual personality, they are not looking for acknowledgement. They do things for the sake of doing it. They are just being, they are not doing, and they allow things to happen. They are not going after or hankering after anything. So that gentleness, that compassion, that love automatically starts to ooze through those people.
Ego tells me, you can't afford to be so generous, Wayne. You worked hard for what you have. You don't have to give the woman who is cleaning toilets in the hotel that much. Just $1 or $2 is sufficient. Back off and think of yourself first. On and on go these messages from ego. I sometimes find myself imagining putting my ego in a box, sealing it, and even sitting on it to keep it from resurfacing and pulling me away from my commitment to a life of meaning through practicing what I learned from Mother Teresa, which I'll reiterate. Love must be put into action, and that action is service. I remind myself that love has no meaning if I let it remain alone and focused on me.
Okay, so again, putting my ego in a box. So it's the ECB, right? I don't know how many of you have done the excursion workshop or even that reball exercise. So one of the steps in the preparatory process in all Monroe Institute exercises is the energy conversion box, where we put all the stuff that is not relevant to the exercise that we are doing at that present moment. Now, if you look at it, when we are looking at all these books, whatever spiritual stuff we are looking at, everywhere the ego is the problem. Even when we are talking about from the Vedantic principles or from the Bhagavad Gita, the ego needs to be put into the box. So the more you can put the ego into the box, so our life is like an exercise. So if we can put the ego into a box and not allow it to run our lives, then automatically we will shift to the right side of the grid.
I'm reminded of Ram Das, who told me that his years of putting his ego aside and being of service to his mother, father, and stepmother, as well as to people with AIDS and cancer, were the most fulfilling and meaningful times in his life. He'd carry his dad from his bed to the toilet, wipe and comfort him, never feeling that it was a burden. In fact, my friend called it the greatest opportunity of his life. Devoting himself to helping and being supportive allowed him to fully grasp the real meaning behind Lao Tzu's admonition to live this fourth cardinal virtue.
So again, when we are in service, but again, it depends on which side of the grid we are operating from. I posted the levels of consciousness. We'll attempt to look at it at the end if we finish the book today, but otherwise we'll take it up tomorrow. So where are you operating from? What is the level of consciousness you're operating from when you're doing something? If I'm constantly cribbing and doing it, then I'm cutting my own feet. If I'm allowing it to flow, if I'm doing it with a higher state of consciousness, then it becomes beautiful. Now he's carrying his father and wiping his toilet and all that stuff. Now if he's doing it from a higher state of consciousness, it becomes love. But if he's cribbing and doing it, then it becomes a burden. So the same action can be a burden for a person and can be a pleasure for another person. So what is your perspective about looking at that action becomes extremely important in this case.
All of us can get into the habit of living a life based on service without expectation of reward by simply adopting a practice of radical humility. This is one of the key components of highly evolved people.
So you'll find the more spiritual the person, the more humility they have, the more gentleness they have, the more compassion they have.
Just observe how nature operates. The ocean stays low yet gains tremendous strength. That's because all of the rivers and streams ultimately flow down and come to it. As the Tao teaching reminds us, why is the sea king of 100 streams? Because it lies below them. Therefore, those desiring a position above others must speak humbly.
So again, where is the strength coming from? When you have humility, there is strength in that humility because you'll not be ego driven, right? You will listen to people. When you're acting out of ego, out of arrogance, then you'll not listen and you'll want to do your own thing. That becomes a huge problem for most people. When you think that you know everything. You will find that the most profound people, they are always willing to listen. They can always learn something from the other guy. So they are always open to that learning. They are always open to that receiving. And that's why they have the power to give also. Because they have the power to receive, they have the power to give. So that becomes very, very important.
Trees bend low with ripened fruit, clouds hang down with gentle rain, and noble leaders bow graciously. This is the way of meaning and purpose. By practicing radical humility, we send a firm message to ego that we intend to have meaning and purpose in our life and are going to live from these four cardinal virtues.
So again, what is the message that we are sending out? What is our thinking? What are our thoughts? What is the state of consciousness that we are having our thoughts? So the moment we start observing our thoughts, we start observing what we are, because our thoughts are what makes us. And that is what radiates out from us. Okay. Now, if someone is thinking ulta pulta thoughts, let me tell you, your body will get to know. Our bodies are hypersensitive. The kind of sensitivity that our body has, it is phenomenal. They've done some experiments where they had people sitting in front of a computer, and they had attached all these skin galvanizing response, electrical potential, the sweat, I mean the sweat rate, the HRV. They had all these gadgets attached to the person, okay, and they had these pictures flashing in front of them. Now, what they found was that before the picture came in front of the screen, the body had already responded. So the body actually has precog characteristics. There is precognition in what the body can sense. But we don't listen to our bodies anymore. The more we start listening to our body, you'll find that so much the body can tell us, it's not it's really not funny.
The four virtues are not an external dogma, but a part of your original nature. When practiced, they give birth to wisdom and evoke the five blessings: health, wealth, happiness, longevity, and peace.
So how does this do that? When you are operating in the right side of the grid, the sympathetic nervous system stops working. So there is something which is running all the stuff in our body, is the central nervous system and the autonomous nervous system. Now, whenever we are stressed out, the sympathetic nervous system is active. And when we are in a relaxed mode, the parasympathetic nervous system is active. Now, the sympathetic nervous system is on the left side of the grid, and the parasympathetic is actually on the right side of the grid. So the more time we are spending on the right side of the grid, the better our health will be, because digestion, healing and maintenance, regeneration is all controlled by the parasympathetic nervous system, not by the sympathetic. The sympathetic nervous system is responsible for the fight and flight response. So the more stressed out you are, automatically your longevity, happiness, everything starts getting affected. Now, if you're on the right side of the gate, you'll take better decisions, you'll take more informed decisions, you'll listen more, so you'll get better decision making. So when you are taking better decisions, automatically your wealth will also improve. And it's been researched. The difference between a successful person and an unsuccessful person is, if a person is making 10 decisions, the successful person makes 7 correct decisions, and the unsuccessful person makes only 4 correct decisions. So there's not much of a difference. But if I can operate out of equanimity, out of stillness, connected with guidance, because that guy sees the bigger picture than what we see, and then take decisions, automatically the decisions will become correct, and which will lead to wealth, happiness, peace, harmony, everything in our lives.
These traits describe people who have transcended their false selves and are living lives filled with meaning. They are not tormented with questions like, what if my whole life has been wrong? They have made the shift to a higher level.
So now what does this mean? What if my whole life has been wrong? When do you connect, when do you ask that question? When there is a hollowness in you, when there is dissatisfaction, when there is an emptiness, and you feel that something is missing in your life. But when we connect to the higher state of consciousness, then that emptiness will not be there anymore. You are fulfilled with your goal. You're flowing with the goal. With the path. You're not even interested in the goal. The journey becomes the goal. And at that time, there is no disharmony, there is no ill effect. You're constantly doing your best. You're constantly keeping your word. You don't make assumptions. Okay. And then you don't take things personally. The four agreements, all the four tenets will be met when you're going into the state of consciousness.
Shifting from ambition to meaning. There's a wonderful Turkish proverb that succinctly relates a message underlying the shift. It says, no matter how far you have gone on a wrong road, turn back. It doesn't matter how long we've allowed ourselves to travel the road of our false self. We know when it isn't leading us to a sense of purpose and significance, and we can admit we're on the wrong path. The awareness that our life lacks meaning is more than enough of evidence that it takes time to make a U-turn.
So again, how do we deal with a situation? The first thing is awareness. You have to be aware that yes, I'm on the wrong path. The next step is you need to accept that you're on the wrong path. Third step is you need to find out what you can do about it. Okay, so over here, what can you do? You found you're on the wrong path. Now you realize you're on the wrong path, so you can take a U-turn, right? The moment you take a U-turn, then you're going towards the right path. Okay, and now you need to implement whatever you said, a U-turn. You implement it and then watch whether it is working or not. Now, when you take U-turn, you may go into another road which is incorrect. So become aware of it and then take the steps necessary.
Here are the three of the most important things to watch out for as we shift to the path of a meaningful and purposeful life. The shift from entitlement
Shivangla, we are losing you. Shivangla, we've lost you. Okay.
Here are three of the most important things to watch out for as we shift to the path of a meaningful and purposeful life. Number one, the shift from entitlement to humility. This is a monumental shift away from ego's habitual thought pattern, which says that we are entitled regardless of the impact on others or the planet. The fact is, we are entitled to nothing. Nevertheless, ego's me first self-importance keeps us in a persistent state of frustration. This type of mentality provokes generalized anger at the world and many of the people in it.
So again, entitlement is a big issue today. I've had children, especially. We pamper the children so much that they start expecting everything will be done for them. And when they go out in the world, they find that everything is not done for them. They got to do for themselves, which leads to a lot of frustration, a lot of ill feeling, and a lot of issues that the youngsters today have. They don't have stability. They keep jumping. Today, if you call for an interview from people, you will find that they not stayed more than 2 years in one company. Now, if you're not going to stay even 2 years in a company or in a job, how are you going to settle down? How are you going to get stress free? How are you going to be able to understand what is happening? They are constantly jumping all the time, and this leads to a lot of frustration because they are after the material aspect all the time. The spiritual aspect has not been given to them only. I remember when we were growing up, we were made to do the Hanuman Chalisa and all these things. Today, how many kids do that? How many kids actually visit the temple in the house or actually sit with their grandparents listening to stories of the various things? We had Amar Chitra Kathas. We had so many things that we used to do. Now they are in the phone all the time and they are totally engrossed in that. So that entire aspect, that transfer of culture has gone wacko, and that automatically will lead to frustration because it becomes me first attitude and they're not concerned about what anyone else wants. Also, this also is a problem here now. Authority needs to flow from the top to the bottom. But today, in everyone's house, the youngest in the house has become the boss, because everyone falls in line with what the youngster wants and not with the what the eldest wants. So again, wisdom comes from the top, right? This guy doesn't have wisdom, he doesn't have experience as to what is right and wrong, but we are following the youngster in the house rather than the elder. So naturally this guy is going to get egoistic. When he goes out, he expects everyone will listen to him, and that becomes a huge cause of frustration.
A sense of entitlement is an irritating mindset that creates friction. It appears uncaring, conceited, and only concerned with self. The directives we give to young, spoiled, ego-dominated children are valuable when we catch ourselves in ego's dominance. Think of someone other than yourself. Share your toys and treat others the way you wish to be treated. And similar pieces of advice are good for us to follow too as we begin the shift from ambition to meaning.
So again, doing for others, being there for others, supporting others is what makes life move. We are going to read the book next, Ikagai next. One of the main tenets of that book is community. How each of the members of the community support each other. So they are constantly in service to each other. And that's what leads to the longevity. When we operate out of selfishness, then the support system gets eradicated. And that's a big problem today.
We must let go of the childish view that the world owes us. President John F. Kennedy's famous call to ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country is a stirring reminder to collectively shift away from a sense of entitlement and in the direction of humility. Here, we are living from a place of God realization rather than self centeredness.
So as soon as we shift from self-centeredness, we move towards God realization. Take it the opposite way. Okay. So again, service to others, doing for others from a higher state of consciousness, not from an ego-driven state. If it is from an ego-driven state, then it becomes a transaction and you are operating from a lower state of consciousness. You have to operate, you have to do it selflessly from a higher state of consciousness. Then it starts to elevate you and it starts to churn. It starts to bring stuff more and more and more.
Making the shift to humility doesn't mean that we put ourselves down or are weak, but it does mean that we think of serving others before ourselves. Humility is the way of service, nurturing the sense of purpose that gives a dimension of significance to our lives.
So again, the moment we start serving others, we feel the pleasure within ourselves. We feel desired. We feel the wantedness. We feel we are doing something uplifting, and it automatically fuels our own worth in our own eyes. The what do you think of yourself is so important. It is not funny. But most of the time, when we look at ourselves, I ask this question to people when we do the workshops. Who would you like to be with in a thought responsive universe? And let me tell you, if you start introspecting, that whatever you are thinking is going to manifest, you would not like to be with yourself also. So it becomes so important to create significance for ourselves in our own eyes and value for ourselves in our own eyes. And the only way that you can do it is to shift out of self-centeredness into an expansive state of consciousness. There is no other way.
When we notice that we are thinking about what we are entitled to, we can remind ourselves that we are on the wrong road. Then we can find a way to return to humility and get back on track towards experiencing meaning.
So again, the moment we are self-centered, we are on the left side of the grid. And the way out of that left side of the grid is awareness, to become aware that we are on the left side of the grid. Then we can put a strategy in place to take us to the right side of the grid.
When we ask ourselves, how can I want for someone else even more of what I'm feeling entitled to? This may help suspend our sense of entitlement, if even for just a moment. purpose blossoms through the practice of radical humility. It isn't nurtured in thoughts of what we feel we are entitled to.
Okay, so if I'm in entitlement, then humility will not be there because ego will be there. It is my right, it is my right, it is my right. But you'll find the highly spiritual person will always step back. He'll allow others to go. He's not to go and he's not going to grab anything and come back. There was a story about Japan after the Second World War was devastated. Food was being distributed to the Japanese people, and what they found was everyone just took what they were entitled to, and they formed very clear queues. It was not like what would happen in various countries, including our own, that सबको एक के ऊपर एक झपटा मार के उठाने का चेष्टा कर रहे हैं. Everyone just took what they needed to take. They did not take more, so that everyone got equally distributed. And that's the reason why Japan came, bounced back, and ultimately became a world power, all even though the atomic bomb was put on Japan. So today also, if you go to Japan and you ask someone for directions, don't be surprised if they go with you to that place to drop you there, and then they will go their own way. That is how they operate. So it's out of that humility that they are operating, generally speaking. Of course, there are exceptions to the rule, but this is what we found. When I went to Germany, I found Japan, I found this happening over there.
2. The shift from control to trust. If we are honest with ourselves, every one of us can agree that we are acquainted with the ego part that controls and manages our lives and eagerly attempts to do the same for others, be they family, friends, co-workers, or even strangers. Ego routinely accepts the job of edging God out and taking on the role of being the master manipulator.
So again, ego will want control. Ego will want things done in its own way. It is not going to allow. It will always be in doing, not in being. And when we are not being, then we are edging God out because we are not in the flow. Because we are doing. It becomes effortful rather than effortless.
As we move in a different direction, we realize the pointlessness of attempting to control any individual or any situation. We recognize this need to practice interference as the power trip of our false self.
So again, resistance. The more we resist, the more it persists. So whatever we resist will come into our life. Why? Because the pattern gets created. So if I'm the universe is putting something into my life and I'm resisting it. So what does it imply? My life path that I've chosen wants me to do that thing. Now, if I'm resisting it, the universe in its benevolence that to put me in the right track will keep creating that same thing in my life. Now, the moment I act out of humility and I start accepting it, then I keep starting to learn my life lessons and start moving forward. So the resistance, when the resistance drops, the movement starts. Okay, so words like can't, won't, should, and all these things, they really have to be dropped in my view.
There was a time in my life, for instance, when I needed to be in charge of most social conversations. Having made the shift from control to trust means that I now flow with the conversational direction and opinions that are expressed. I am content to sit back and observe, even as others take on the false self role, as I view it. I can smile inwardly at some of my children's choices in life, even when I disagree. The shift from control to trust has increased my non-interference.
So now, as soon as even our children, and we want to direct our children, we want to control what our children are doing. Because of that, we are putting pressure on them to, and it's become a fact that we want to live our lives through our children. Now that creates a problem for the child as well as for us because they are not happy doing what we want them to do, and we are not happy how they are doing it because they're not doing it full heart. Now, if they don't want to do it with their heart and logically they have to do it because you're telling them to do it, it will not work out. Only when the heart and the mind are working in conjunction do you get results or manifestation. So over here, if I am interfering with what is happening, then I am not in the flow. I need to allow what is happening. And the moment I start doing that, we'll find that our children will find their own balance. They will learn the own lessons that they need to learn. Most of the time, we want to protect our children, but by protecting them in some way, we actually create a problem for them. It's like when a child is learning how to walk, if you keep supporting the child will not learn how to walk properly. You have to allow the child to fall. In the same example, if you see a caterpillar, when the caterpillar is it's bursting and the wings are coming out, if you help the caterpillar, the butterfly will not get created properly. The strength will not be there in the wings. The strength comes in the wings when the caterpillar bursts out of the cocoon and becomes a butterfly. So you have to know when to help and when not to help. You observe that if there is too much going on, then you can step in, but you need to observe. So he says over here, I can inwardly smile at some of my children's life choices, even when I disagree. So you may not agree with everything that's happening, but still you take a witness attitude. So taking a witness attitude becomes very important in this case.
Beyond my personal interactions with friends and family, in a much larger sense, I trust more and control less. In my heart, I know that God writes the books, delivers the speeches, and builds the bridges. When trust replaces control, edging God out isn't appealing.
So now what is happening? He's saying he's written a lot of books. But where did that book come from? It came from inspiration. Now there are three places where we can operate from. This is coming from the Zero Limits lectures. So we can operate out of memory. That is our past experience. We can operate out of uh, uh, downloads, okay, or inspiration, and we can operate out of stillness, out of zero. So what he's saying over here is God is writing the books, so he is actually shifting into zero. He is moving out of the way and allowing God to manifest through him. Now that's a beautiful state, so it's beyond inspiration also.
All I have seen teaches me to trust the Creator for all I have not seen. May have been Ralph Waldo Emerson's words, but I agree so completely that they could be my own. I absolutely trust the wisdom of the universe and its creative source.
So again over here, all I have seen teaches me to trust the Creator for all that I have not seen. Because that wisdom knows much more than this. We are operating out of the small consciousness. That guy knows so much. Okay. So now who do we trust? This guy or this guy? It's very clear. You need to trust this guy.
With trust, we acknowledge our own wisdom. We remember that we came from the same source and, therefore, must be like what we came from. We can trust Source to guide us rather than screw things up with ego's demands for self recognition and belief in our superiority.
So again over here, you'll find that people who are spiritually evolved, they will always be humility is oozing from them. They are always willing to learn. So they are never going to be demanding recognition. They allow things to happen. And they're always going to be in the back seat. They're never coming in the front seat. When we take aura pictures of people, we find that there are two sets of aura pictures. There's the red golden spectrum and the blue violet spectrum. The blue violet spectrum is the spiritualistic spectrum where most people who are spiritualistically blend will come get those colors in their aura, and those people are always the power behind the throne. They don't want to come in front. They organize everything, they get everything done, and there is humility in those people. Whereas in the golden aura people, there's arrogance. There is, that I am doing it. The ego is very much in play in the golden aura people. Although again, everything has its own benefits, everything has its own growth pattern.
Trust lets us listen rather than take over. Listening allows us to comfortably sit back, knowing that the greater source of everything is in charge instead of our puny little ego. Shifting from control to trust is so important for our life work.
So when we start listening, when we start trusting, life automatically becomes easier because we are not wanting to push anything. We are allowing things to happen. The resistance is not there. And as soon as resistance is not there, the flow starts to become. So now today, if the less resistance there is, let's say a car is moving, it's moving on a smooth road and it's moving on an ubad khabad road, on a rough road. Where will the speed be more? Where will the fuel efficiency be more? On a smoother road. So if I can start operating out of trust, my life path starts to become smoother. There are less bumps in the road. And even if the bumps are there, we can smoothly navigate the bumps and not be affected by them.
In the Shift movie, I relate how I found the road that resonated with the calling of my soul. I did so by listening to what I was feeling deep within me, rather than what my ego was saying to me about how to capitalize on my fame by writing books to make more money.
So his publisher was telling him to write a book on sex. But he said, no, I want to write a book which has meaning. Because he had shifted. He had shifted from ambition to meaning. So the ambition, that making of more money, accumulating more, was out of the picture from him. He wanted to create meaning in his life. He wanted to make a difference.
By trusting my inner excitement, I was able to make a big shift in my life away from writing about psychology to writing about living life from a spiritual orientation. That shift away from the ambition of ego, which tried to control my writing and speaking career, put me on the path of meaning.
So again, the shift.
When you disengage from ego control, what is it that you trust? There are three markers to look for on this road. They are trust in yourself, trust in others, and trust in the source of being. Here's a brief explanation of each of them. Trust in yourself. This means hearing your soul speak in whatever way it does.
So now this is what is very important. Connecting to that inner, deeper state of our own consciousness. And that can only happen when there is stillness. There's the chatter, the mind chatter stops. Okay. Then you allow the drops to come in. You allow that wisdom to seep into you. You allow the guidance to seep into you. And you put yourself in a position to listen to the guidance.
Trust in yourself. This means hearing your soul speak in whatever way it does. Intuition is generally a reliable voice in whatever form it expresses itself individually.
So now again, learning how to listen to that voice becomes very, very important. Many times we hear the voice, but we are not aware it's the voice of intuition. And let me tell you from experience, I'm telling you that intuitive voice, the more you act on what is being told, the more powerful it becomes, the more effective it becomes. So that openness to that guidance is extremely important.
Mahatma Gandhi explained his sense of it. What is truth? A difficult question, but I have solved it for myself by saying that it is what the voice within tells you.
So again, we have to develop a relationship with that voice. The better our relationship with the voice, we know that okay, what is being said. Today, when we know someone, we understand what they are talking, what they are thinking. Many times it happens with husband and wife also that they complete their sentences. So again, listening to that voice becomes very important.
Trust in others. This means non interference as much as possible. Everyone has the universe located in him or her. Trusting others frees you from feeling obligated to interfere. In the words of Lao Tzu in the Tao Te Ching,
Okay, now this is important. Okay, everyone has the universe located in him or her. Trusting others frees you from feeling obligated to interfere. Now let's say you've given a job to someone and you keep poking that person, kya ho raha hai, kya ho raha hai, kya ho raha hai, kya ho raha hai, do you think he's going to be able to do the job? Or you're constantly, whatever he's doing, you're constantly telling him that no, don't do it like this, do it another way. Now, if you do not allow another person the freedom to act in the way that they are driven, you're constantly creating resistance for yourself as well as the other person. So trusting the other person to do their best becomes very, very important. And this is also one of the handmarks of a good leader. They allow people to do what needs to be done, and they give them the freedom to do that. So they give them the authority as well as the responsibility to do something. Okay, this becomes very, very important from everything in our lives. Even with our children, you have to give them authority with responsibility and then allow them to take their own decisions.
Trust in others. This means non-interference as much as possible. Everyone has the universe located in him or her. Trusting others frees you from feeling obligated to interfere. In the words of Lao Tzu in the Tao Te Ching, do you think you can take over the universe and improve it? I do not believe it can be done. Everything and everyone under heaven is a sacred vessel and cannot be controlled. Trying to control leads to ruin. Trying to grasp, we lose.
So again, with our small mind, with our small level of consciousness, our small level of awareness, it is literally impossible for us to control everything. When we go into the altered states, when we go into Focus 27, there's a planning center. And let me tell you that experience of that planning center is like out of the world. The kind of planning that needs to go into what is happening here is not funny, because we have to match up everyone's requirement with everyone else. Just imagine that today we are all sitting here reading this book together. There is a plan in place. There is a reason why all of us are here. We just didn't land up here. So many things had to happen and manifest for us to be sitting here together at this point in time. COVID had to happen, internet had to happen, Zoom had to happen. All of us had to have the time to come here. All of us had to be interested in the book to come here. So many things had to happen for this to manifest. Who's planning all this? Where is it happening from? So if we are going to think that we can control things which are small mind, it is literally impossible.
Trust in the source of being. This means trusting the mystery of creation. The universal source of all creation, invisible though it may be, guides you just as it guided your development in the womb. When you trust in divine intelligence, you cooperate and invite the shift to meaning.
So again, in the womb, how are things happening for you? Now, what makes you think that in this present time, again, things can't be happening for you, that everything has been prepared for you? Now, the more we start trusting that process, the more we shift into meaning, the more meaning we start creating in our lives.
3. The shift from attachment to letting go. Perhaps the greatest lessons of my life have revolved around the slogan of the recovery moment: let go and let God. A notion that involves relinquishing ego's attachment to or fear of something. The single most pronounced attachment for most of us during the morning of our lives is the attachment to being right. There's nothing ego loves more than to be right, which makes it an important and satisfying attachment to practice letting go of.
So again, we are attached to being right all the time. Okay. The moment you start accepting, you start allowing, then the flow starts. That is when we make the connection, we jack in.
I seriously doubt that there's anyone reading this book who hasn't engaged in arguing about trivial matters that turned into disagreements which had a net effect of following a road of self-righteous anger. And all of it probably seemed to be for no reason other than the need, the desire to be right.
So all the time, most of our disagreements come from where? two people are taking a opposite position. Okay. Now, if one person drops the resistance, then automatically things start moving right. But again, here the problem is that most people don't listen. If you can listen, then 90% of the issues will get automatically taken care of.
Eventually, we may look back with wistful amusement, realizing now that our fear of actually being wrong was so strong that another person's opinion could energize this unwanted feeling. Ego's strategy was to be right no matter what, a highly successful maneuver that effectively distracted us from genuine purpose. Letting go of an attachment to being right is a fairly simple exercise.
So again, the problem is not that we want to be right, but there is a fear of being wrong. So the moment you start deciding that I am willing to be wrong, 90% of your arguments drop. Because if the other guy is saying something which is correct, you start accepting it. Why? Because you're willing to be wrong. Most of us aren't willing to be wrong. That is where the actual problem stems from.
The choice to let go and let God in a quest to eliminate our attachment to being right is simplified with these few words. You're right about that, but keep in mind that kindness and sincerity are necessary here, as opposed to sarcasm or insincerity.
So
Those
again,
four
we
words,
again over here, okay, we have to be compassionate. We have to allow things to manifest and then do it. If we are going to be critical and sarcastic all the time, we land up creating a problem.
those four words will gradually open the entry point to a road that leads through letting go and letting God to experiencing more significance in life. Another way to easily practice breaking ego's attachments is to clear out the garage, cupboards, and closets. Let go of material possessions and practice not being attached to them. If they haven't been used in the past 12 months, they belong somewhere else. We can train ourselves to be one of those that Joel Goldsmith describes in his book, A Parenthesis in Eternity, Living the Mystical Life.
So again, decluttering. Okay, we keep accumulating stuff. Decluttering becomes very, very important.
Then there are those who reach a stage in which they realize the futility of this constant striving and struggling for the things that perish, things which after they are obtained prove to be shadows. It is at this stage that some persons turn from this seeking for things in the outer realm to a seeking for them from God.
So we think that some object in this 3D world is going to give us satisfaction. But we find that the moment we get it, it is not giving us the satisfaction that we perceived it will give us. Okay. And then we start getting disenchanted. And that's when the shift starts taking place from material possession to the spiritual aspect of things.
Most stress results from hanging on to beliefs that keep us striving for more, because ego stubbornly refuses to believe we don't need something. When we make the shift, the influence of our ego fades.
So over
We
here, most stress results from hanging on to beliefs that keep us striving for more. You'll find that most spiritual people, there's no striving. They're happy with what they have. They're content with what they have. The moment we start appreciating and being content with what we have, automatically the ego will drop. Okay, the influence of ego in our lives will take a backseat.
replace attachment with contentment. Chasing and striving and then becoming attached to what we chased after is a source of anxiety that invigorates ambition, but it won't satisfy the need for meaning at our soul level.
So
Everything
chasing after a goal ultimately once you reach that goal, then what? Another goal will come. So the point is that if we start being, then we live a life full of contentment and happiness and joy. We are not hankering after something. If I'm striving for something, that means I don't have it. So I'm operating out of lack. If I'm operating out of lack, I'm operating in the left side of the grid. Now, if I do not achieve that ambition, it puts me down. But if I'm just being, I'm allowing things to happen, then I'm happy in any given situation. It doesn't matter if something happens or it doesn't happen. I am still in equanimity. I am still in peace within myself.
Chasing and striving, and then becoming attached to what we chased after, is a source of anxiety that invigorates ambition, but it won't satisfy the need for meaning at our soul level. Everything that we pursue ultimately distances us from our original nature. All of our attachments are destined to perish. They are all shadows, as Goldsmith points out.
So all these material attachments that we have, they are not permanent. We will constantly outgrow them. So till we are striving for them and we don't get them, we feel that if we get them, we'll be happy. But ultimately, they will also go out of vogue. I remember when the first car, Maruti car came, Arey Maruti, 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 Maruti. Now where's the Maruti? There is no Maruti only, that Maruti 800. You don't even see it anywhere. So what happened? At that time, it was like an iconic thing. Now it is not worth anything. Previously, having a Mercedes Benz was really something that, you were someone to have a Mercedes. Now every Tom, Dick, and Harry has a Mercedes. Now what's the value of a Mercedes? So same way that there's a law of diminishing returns. So as we progress in consciousness, we understand that material attachments cannot give us deep satisfaction.
As we move in the direction of our authentic self, all of the shifts in this chapter on meaning becomes natural ways of being. New attitudes feel good, and we notice how egoistic demands that we allow to dominate our existence are no longer comfortable. Meaning has preeminence over ego's ambition.
So again, most spiritual people will not have ambition. They've dropped ambition. They live for living life. They live to create meaning in their life.
As we move in the direction of our authentic self, all of the shifts in this chapter on meaning become natural ways of being. New attitudes feel good, and we notice how egoistic demands that we allow to dominate our existence are no longer comfortable. Meaning has preeminence over ego's ambition. Living the four cardinal virtues, making the shifts to humility, trust, and letting go feel natural because we are rejoining our original nature. A life of meaning is literally only a thought away.
So again, we are actually coming from that state. You see a child, the child completely trusts, okay, is not attached to anything and is totally humble. He'll just behave in the way that he's behaving. Now that's our true nature. So the idea is to get back into that natural state of things.
Living the four cardinal virtues and making the shifts to humility, trust, and letting go feel natural because we are rejoining our original nature. A life of meaning is literally only a thought away. I'm closing with Sir Lawrence van der Poef's word describing the African bushman's tale of two kinds of hunger and its relation to meaning and purpose in our lives, which also opens the introduction to this book. For me, these paragraphs are supremely symbolic on many levels. Reread them in the spirit of the shift, knowing that each of us is responsible for the meaning we find in our lives.
So again, we need to take responsibility for what is happening in our lives.
The Bushmen in the Kalahari Desert talk about two hungers. There is the great hunger and there is the little hunger. The little hunger wants food for the belly, but the great hunger, the greatest hunger of all, is the hunger for meaning. There's ultimately only one thing that makes human beings deeply and profoundly bitter, and that is to have thrust upon them a life without meaning.
So in the first paragraph, basically it's looking at material things. So food is a material thing. So that hunger is a small hunger. The bigger hunger is our spiritual quest. Okay. And then the next paragraph talks about if my life has no meaning, it's empty. If I look back in my life, what is the meaning that I've created in my life? Now that becomes very important. What have I actually done? What have I really achieved? Have I made a difference? That is what creates meaning in my life.
There is nothing wrong in searching for happiness, but of far more comfort to the soul is something greater than happiness or unhappiness, and that is meaning. Because meaning transfigures all. Once what you are doing has for you meaning, it is irrelevant whether you're happy or unhappy. You are content. You are not alone in your spirit. You belong.
So once the meaning comes in your life, then sukh and dukh or happiness or unhappiness drops because they don't hold any more value. And you are connected with that expanded state of consciousness. So naturally, again, because you are connected there, you are constantly happy. So happiness and unhappiness take a walk. So we finished this book today. That's great. Anyone anything to say?
Thank you.
Okay, now tomorrow, anything to say?
No, thank you. Really,
Okay,
thank you.
so now what we'll do is, if you all are all okay with it, we will watch a few episodes of The Fringe.
Okay.
Okay, so Thursday and next week we will attempt to watch The Fringe, and then we'll talk about it. We'll do it in the classic awareness way, where if anyone has a question or anyone wants to input, or if I want to say something, we'll stop the clip and then we will talk about it and then move forward.
Okay.
Okay, everyone all right with that?
Yes.
Yes, please.
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
Sudha.
Yes, thanks.
Is it the one from Amazon
No,
Prime?
yeah, Prime.
It
Yeah,
is, I
Amazon
think
Prime.
it is there in Prime, but I have the
Yeah.
original DVDs. So
Okay.
we'll
I'm
play the
watching it
original
now,
DVDs.
Niket, on the Prime. It's on Prime only.
I know
Okay.
it's
Huh.
available, but then when we are watching it together, there's a very big difference, I think.
100%.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we'll watch it together. It'll just give a shift. It talks about parallel universes. Okay, so it's a very, very interesting concept.
Very interesting.
Yeah, so it'll be worth going through that. So it'll give us a break from books also, because I think this is the fourth book, or third book we've done, right?
No, 4th, I think.
Yeah, the fourth book. So 4 books we've
Fourth.
done. So let's give it a break, and we are going to start Ikigai next. Okay, so this is the book Ikigai. This book we are going to start next. So this talks about, this is a very interesting book also, the Japanese secret of a long and happy life. So very much in conjunction with what we are doing. Okay.
Yeah.
So we will watch Fringe on Thursday.
Thank you.
I have
Thank
the
you,
PDF. I
Bhaiya.
will share the PDF with everyone. I think I've already shared it, if I'm not mistaken.
No.
No, Bhaiya.
No.
Okay, we'll share it again. We'll share the PDF. Okay, thank you. Ram Ram.
Thank you.
Thanks.
See you all for meditation. See you all for
Yes,
meditation.
Ram Ram.
Ram Ram. Thanks.
Bhaiya.
Thanks, Shri Mangla.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Sri Mangla Babi.
Thank you.
Ram Ram.
Welcome.
Ram. Thank you.